Some call me the sage from South Central. Others call me the czar of common sense. But you can call me Larry Elder. And you're invited to join me tonight, starting at 7, right here on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Well, Brett Kavanaugh is President Trump's nominee for the Supreme Court, of course, and I think we should get these hearings scheduled and get that confirmation vote going post-haste.
Yeah, did you hear what he was doing yesterday? He was helping the homeless, something that he always does, and it was scheduled long before he was nominated to the Supreme Court.
That is the kind of activity
that
has him properly characterized as a threat to our very way of life in this country. That's not me saying that. That's Yale law students, alumni, professors. Judge Kavanaugh's nomination presents an emergency for democratic life, small d, for our safety and freedom. I'm scared for the future of our country. Kavanaugh is a menace. Yale's celebration of his achievements is motivated by nothing more than its lust for proximity to power and prestige. They continue. We've got a real crisis on our hands, as evidenced by that activity that you mentioned.
Scandalous.
Properly characterized by the best and brightest that Yale has to offer. In addition, we have now learned that in 2016, Brett Kavanaugh bought a bunch of baseball tickets to Washington Nationals games. I don't know how this guy lives with himself.
I mean, and then he paid off his credit cards, too. And his friends that he bought tickets for paid him back.
It's a fascinating story of intrigue.
If this is all they have on him, there's no there.
Well, I mean, look, what if Bryce Harper is involved in a case before the high court? Then Judge Kavanaugh will have to recuse himself. We can't have that, can we? For expert legal insight on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by our friend, former U.S. Attorney General of the United States, former counsel to the president, and now the dean of Belmont University School of Law in Nashville. Also, his latest book, True Faith and Allegiance. He is Alberto Gonzales. Alberto Gonzales, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning. And I'm also a big baseball fan, I admire what Brett Kavanaugh did. That's a good thing.
Is that why you were not nominated to the high court, your fandom of the Nationals?
I'm not a fan of it. I grew up in Houston, so I'm a big Houston Astros fan.
Oh, well, best team in baseball right there. So what about Brett Kavanaugh? I assume you had interaction with him during your time at the White House when he was at the White House?
Sure. He worked for me for 2.5 years, so I got to know Brett quite well, and I have to applaud President Trump. I think he's made an excellent choice, and I think over time, people are going to see that Brett is going to be fair and open-minded in all these cases. He's very smart, but not arrogant. I've yet to meet anybody who has spent significant time with Brett, even people that work for him, who doesn't respect him with just a very genuine person. And so we all enjoyed working with him. He was a great colleague in the White House, and I think he'll do a good job on the court.
Do you think he has any moderate tendencies? I mean, I've been hearing that he's a conservative, but he may become a moderate once he is sworn in. Is that?
I don't know. I don't know what that means. When people describe that, what they're saying or they're worried about is whether or not on various social issues will he not support their views on where the court should go on social issues. I think Brett's just going to try the very best to be totally objective, and whatever the text of the Constitution, he's going to look carefully at precedents and look carefully at the text of statutes. He has always impressed me as someone who believes strongly in judicial restraint, understanding that there are just some issues the courts have no business weighing in on, that should be rightly left to the elected branches who are accountable to the people. So I just, whether I don't know what that means, moderate tendencies. I think Brett's going to be fair and open-minded, and I think that's all we can expect of a justice on the Supreme Court.
Just a little bit more of, since you've had so much personal experience with him, just if you could color in your interactions with him a little bit more, the kind of person he is, how he treated colleagues. I know, of course, he met his wife during his time at the Bush White House, too. So, I mean, just sort of, him as a three-dimensional human being, not just a guy in a black robe.
Right. Well, he has a good sense of humor. He loves sports. There were times when I would take Brett and some of the other lawyers out to play golf at Andrews Air Force Base. We did that from time to time. So he's a good athlete, and obviously still coaches with his daughter's basketball teams. But as I said, he's just very thoughtful, no snap judgments, a good listener. I led a team of superstar lawyers. I think we had like 12 lawyers, 8 of them so clerked in the U.S. Supreme Court. These were all, this was a superstar team of lawyers. And I think, Brett was very well respected by this team. He and another lawyer, Brad Berenson, were probably the most senior. And so I think the other lawyers kind of looked to them. And, for example, Brad and Brett were responsible for setting up the process we put in place to examine judges and recommend judges, including the Supreme Court, to President Bush. And so, I've got nothing but good things to say about Brett Kavanaugh. And as I said, I think he's just going to do a superb job on the court. And
if confirmed, he would make history because they need to have 2 former clerks from the same justice serving on the court together, that being Justice Kennedy. Do you think he'll sail through these confirmation hearings?
No, I don't. I think it's going to be a difficult process. I think Brett, having worked in the White House and having worked to get judges confirmed, not Supreme Court judges, but other circuit court judges and district court judges, Brett understands the process extremely well, and I think that's going to benefit him. He knows what he's going to have to go through. It's not going to be fair, but it is part of the process. I think he appreciates how pivotal this seat is viewed by many in America. So I think it'll be tough, and there'll be questions and allegations, accusations that'll be totally untrue and unfair, but Brett understands that. I think he's prepared his family for that, and they'll get through it. It's a tough process, and it should be tough. This is a lifetime appointment, and this is for a pivotal seat. So I would expect the members of the Senate to do their job and to carefully scrutinize this nominee. But I'm very hopeful, that it's going to be as fair as we might expect it. And but at the end of the day, given his qualifications and given what I know about him as a person, I expect him to be confirmed.
How do you react to the demagoguery of this letter penned by Yale law students and alumni and professors in opposition to Kavanaugh, an emergency to our very way of life in this country? I guess Elena Kagan, who hired Brett Kavanaugh to teach at Harvard Law, also presents such an emergency. I had no idea. But just in terms of the confirmation process, the scrutiny, it's not really scrutiny. It's just a bunch of politicians taking the opportunity to demagogue from one perspective or another. And so, how much of that really is productive for the American people in terms of inspiring confidence in the court and its members?
Well, that is a danger. I think that I was asked a few days ago about whether or not am I fearful that the court has become sort of more partisan and viewed as a political institution, and my response was I have more concern that the American people view it as such, and the kind of rhetoric that we're seeing today obviously contributes to that perception, and I think that's unfortunate. Students, law students, I respect law students, but obviously there's a lack of maturity sometimes in the things that are said, and even with respect to law professors who I deal with day to day. And everyone has a right to speak their opinion. I'd like to hope that they would those opinions would be based upon fact and not intended to spread fear. But again, as I said earlier, I think as long as Brett receives a fair hearing, and there will be unfair accusations and allegations made against him, but based on what I know, he's going to be confirmed.
The Federalist Society. Federalist Society is now being targeted by the left and mischaracterized by the left because it's exhibited success. And as David Brooks said in a column over the weekend and on PBS NewsHour, they've done the hard work of putting together talented people who exhibit professional excellence over the last 35 years, and those individuals like Brett Kavanaugh are the fruits of that labor. And I wonder, Leonard Leo, who's kind of been President Trump's point man on the Supreme Court nominations, on leave from the Federalist Society, his Catholicism has been brought into question, much like Amy Coney Barrett's was by DiFi during her confirmation. So it's not just kind of the political rhetoric. You're also getting into real barbs directed at organizations and individuals based on their faith as well. That seems to be ratcheting up, and I wonder if you had any comment on that.
Yeah, I think that is unfair. I think also, I dealt with Leonard when I was in the White House and the Federalist Society, and obviously sought their input. But at the end of the day, I think Neil Gorsuch, if we had been in the White House and I was the White House counsel looking at two vacancies, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh would have been our selections as well, irrespective of any list, irrespective of any recommendation from the Federalist Society. So I don't know about spending energy in attacking organizations like the Federalist Society for these picks. Again, at the end of the day, I would worry more about the nominees than the actual process of how these nominees were chosen or recommended to the President of the United States. The White House consults and should consult with a wide variety of groups, organizations, people about these nominees. And, President Trump decided this is a process he wanted to use. And I think in a way, there are a lot of reasons why it was a good process, but also, when you put people on a list, it immediately puts a bullseye on them and immediately gives opponents opportunity and time to dig up dirt, to formulate a game plan to attack them in the event that they are nominated. So, people, I think, have viewed Brett Kavanaugh as a very serious contender ever since his name appeared on the list, and I'm sure they've been preparing for this. And that is the danger of doing something like a list. But from my perspective, what's really important at the end of the day is the nominee, not so much the process in which that nominee was discovered and recommended to the president.
Yeah, I mean, look, Tom Hardiman didn't get the nomination, and he's still being attacked by the DNC. Yeah,
that's right. It doesn't matter.
Alberto Gonzales, former U.S. Attorney General, Dean of the Belmont University School of Law in Nashville now, also the author of the book, most recently, True Faith and Allegiance. Alberto Gonzales, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Go Bruins. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.